What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Crew Cab Dart YouTube channel. Today we're back on our 5.7 Hemi swap 93 Dodge Ram. In the last video we took our marketplace 5.7 Hemi from a short block to a long block. We installed our refurbished 5.7 heads. I installed a Comp 270 cam, some non-MDF lifters, Hellcat oil pump, a good timing set, all my timing cover and stuff, and I gave it a fresh coat of Hemi orange. So now it's like really close to going in the truck. So since you last saw the Hemi, I've gone ahead and tidied up a few things, like I've installed my 45-degree oil filter adapter, finished up some of the accessory drive up there. I've mocked up my Hooker Blackheart headers, and I've bolted up my Bouchillion motor mounts. So putting one of these Gen 3 Hemis over in one of those first-gen Dodge Rams there, you have a few different options for motor mounts. Bouchillion has these mounts that will allow you to keep the engine in a stock location. Holley makes a mount kit as well that will space the engine. I think it's almost 2 inches forward to help you clear some things off the backside of it. It comes with an accompanying transmission member kit and all that to move everything forward. But I'm using the NV4500 that come in this truck in its stock location. So these Bouchillion mounts will let me use the stock engine location to keep everything happy. So a really important part to any engine build is priming the oiling system. Fortunately on these Gen 3 Hemis, it's pretty easy to prime the engine here. There are 2 ports right here above where the oil filter is located, and the top port here is just a pipe plug. It will prime from this point all the way through the engine up to the valve train, and then this bottom port here will go directly to the oil pump. So what I had done is I went to Walmart, got a $10 garden sprayer. I cut all the spraying mechanism stuff off. All I needed was the hose, and I found a pipe fitting here that would thread right into these 2 ports. I put my sprayer to it, and I just filled this sprayer up with oil and pumped until I saw oil coming from up here in the valve train, and then I pumped about a gallon of oil through the bottom to the oil pump to make sure it's good and primed. So the oil system should be good for our first fire up. I did want to go ahead and do that before I got the engine in the truck because I figured everything was a lot easier to reach while it was out here on the stand. I don't really have enough room on the engine stand to install my new flywheel and clutch kit. So I'm going to wheel the cherry picker out. We'll get this 5.7 up in the air. I'll get my flywheel and clutch kit installed. I need to hop in the truck, put my new throwout bearing on the transmission, and we'll be ready to get this thing shoehorned in there. So that's enough talking about it. Let's get to it. So we're to the point of putting our flywheel and clutch kit on our 5.7 Hemi. And as you guys know, we're putting this 2011 model 5.7 Hemi in front of that 93 model NV4500. So choosing a flywheel, that part was pretty easy. So in 2003 and 2004, the Ram 2500s were optioned with a 5.7 Hemi and an NV4500. So the flywheel, you just get one for 03, 04, 2500 Ram. It bolts right on, no trouble at all. But there's a difference in the clutch kit. So that later model NV4500, they have 10 spline, 1 1/8" diameter input shafts. These early NV4500s, first couple of years of them, had a 19 spline, 1 diameter input shaft. So the clutch kit for the same matching 03, 04 Hemi wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to match with my 93 model NV4500. So I ordered a bunch of parts to the parts store, a bunch of different clutch kits for different year models and whatnot. And to my surprise, the 93 Dodge Ram clutch kit for that 19 spline 1 input shaft transmission would bolt right up to this 03, 04 flywheel. So the actual pressure plate is going to bolt up right the same. The clutch disc is going to work great. It's the correct diameter and everything. The pilot bushings are the same. There is a slight difference in the throwout bearing, but you just get the whole kit, and it bolts to the transmission the same. The only difference is the input shaft diameter there. So to make it short, I'm using an 03, 04 Ram 2500 5.7 flywheel, and I'm using a 93 model Ram truck NV 4500 5-speed 5.2 clutch kit. So just those 2 generation parts are going to bolt together, and that will allow me to mate it all together in the truck happily ever after. So to hold all this stuff together, I'm going to be using some ARP hardware. Just in case anybody's interested, I'll put the part numbers for the ARP flywheel bolts and the ARP pressure plate bolts up on the screen. But let's get her torqued down, and then we'll be ready to drop it over in that engine bay. Well, we run into a bit of a snag here. So I was going to install the pilot bushing / pilot bearing before putting the clutch kit on. And the 93 clutch kit that I mentioned earlier, it comes with both a bushing and a bearing. So from what my research showed is that the pilot bushing / bearing bore in the back of the crankshaft should be right at 1 inch. So that would mean that this bearing should work. It measures 1 inch outside diameter, but it's too big. It's too big to go in this bore, and it comes with this bushing as well. This bushing measures 940 thousandths outside diameter, and it's way too small. So we measured the bore on the back of the crankshaft. It's somewhere around 970 thousandths. So there's about a 30 thousandths gap either which way you go, neither of which is going to work here. So after a little digging, I did find an alternate pilot bearing that, rather than sitting in this small bore here, sits in this bigger bore on the crankshaft. That measures to 1.81 inches, and the alternate bearing has a metal sleeve that also is supposed to measure 1.81 inches. So I've got one ordered to the parts store, and we should be getting it tomorrow morning. Well, we've made it to the next day. We went and grabbed our new pilot bearing here, knocked it in place, fits perfect. I think it's going to work great. So I believe we have that issue remedied. Now we need to throw our clutch and pressure plate on, and then get the engine set over in the truck. So I know I'm kind of expecting a few issues. I've heard there's some brake booster clearance issues, and this truck frame has a extra little plate on it that I'm not familiar with, that I'm not seeing in some of these like Bouchillion pictures and whatnot. But I guess we'll just cross those bridges when we get there. So we'll get the clutch put on and hopefully try to hang it in the truck. So we've got the engine almost sitting in here. We're running into trouble getting the engine mounts to line up. From what I understand, it needs to go in that hole there, and then on the driver's side over here, it's plated and it's got a big slot in it. There's a lot more leeway over here, but we need to get it in that front hole there. We tried it in that one, and the driver's side won't line up if you do it that way. But that's the snag we're in right now. We did have to remove the coil packs, the rear coil packs on either side. That side obviously for the brake booster, and this side for the heater box. Other than that, it's lined up really well. That didn't take near as much effort as we anticipated. And once we got it splined up in there, all the bell housing bolts just threaded right in by hand. So pretty lucky on that part. So now if we can just get these engine mounts slid into place, we'll be in pretty good shape. So far, everything's clear and pretty good. I'm pretty happy about it.
Hey, that thing got a Hemi?
Yeah. Well, folks, that thing's got a Hemi in it. I ain't gonna lie. These mounts, it took some work. It took a little more effort than anticipated, and they're maybe not 100% flat like they need to be. But it's all bolted in there. We've got the transmission bolted up. Engine is bolted to the mounts, and the mounts bolted to the cross member, and it's all in there. I would consider it permanently. unless something crazy happens. I do know that I'm going to have to do a little clearancing on the frame to make room for the alternator with this car front accessory drive, but there's an alternate alternator to try out that moves it a little closer to the timing cover. We're going to try that out before I go really hacking away at the frame, because right now it looks like I've got to cut a really good chunk out of it. But while I'm waiting on that alternator to come in, we're going to go up in the air with it and see how bad it's going to be to put these Hooker headers on. That thing looks good in that engine bay. Well, we got her up in the air. We're going to mock up this passenger side header because from my understanding, it requires the least amount of work. Oh, please fit. Oh. Well, hey, that's right in play. And it looks like it clears everything. Well, that's lovely. I'll just throw a few more bolts in it. Get that tightened down. I have heard the driver's side is a bit more difficult. So the passenger side header is completely in and bolted up. No clearance and issues at all. Really fit nice. And we have gone ahead and mocked up the driver's side header, and it hits pretty heavy right in this area here. So I'm going to see what type of clearancing we're going to have to do there. It also seems to be very tight around the bell housing of the transmission, but I don't want to mess with that until we can get a little clearance here. It's pretty close, but it just needs a little massage in there. So we're going to do a little work here, and then we'll check back in after we get some clearancing done. Okay. So I mentioned before that the driver's side header is going to require a little clearancing, and I fully expected to have to cut part of the cross member out because that's what I've seen everyone else have to do. But we got it up there and we noticed that it was honestly hitting more on the transmission bell housing, on the starter area of the transmission bell housing. And so we just kind of started there. Now, granted, these are the cheapest headers that I could get for this thing, so it didn't really hurt my feelings too much to beat on them. So what we've done is we just made our paint marks and we went through and made a little clearance around the starter bell housing. And after about 4 rounds of beating it really hard with the hammer, we got it up there and noticed we were finally hitting on the spot on the cross member that everyone says you have to cut, which is right around this area. And so we just took the hammer to this area here and we don't have to cut anything. It just slid right up in place after a little percussive maintenance here. But now we're good to hang it up there, so let's get her knocked out. Okay. Already got our gasket hung up there. I don't know if it's the bolts holding it in is gonna be in the way or not. Bam. That's hung in place. Run a couple bolts up, we'll be in good shape. Well, we have finally got the driver's side header installed. All the bolts are on and tightened up. All of our clearancing, while it looks like it wasn't necessary, once it got in place, it was necessary, I believe, to get in place. And all our clearancing up here on the cross member seems to be doing good. So that driver's side header is installed without any notching of the frame like I had anticipated, so that is great. Didn't have to set fire to my new paint or anything like that. It still is pretty tight right there at the cross member, but nothing that, you know, if it's really close, it'll self-clearance a little more, because I'm definitely not taking this header back off. So I call that done. Well, I would call this a fairly productive day. You know, we got our clutch kit on, we overcome our pilot bearing issues, we got the engine sitting in place, bolted down, it's in the truck finally, and we got our headers bolted on and we didn't have to cut the frame. That's pretty sweet, not gonna lie. We still have plenty of work to do before the engine's gonna run and before the truck can ever move. I've still got to do a cooling system, a fuel system, do a bunch of wiring. I'm going to do some wiring to the truck and get rid of that old duck foot. If you're familiar with these trucks, you're familiar with the duck foot. I got to get rid of it. There's still plenty of work to be done, but I'm very, very happy with the progress we've made here recently. So I guess that'll do it. That's going to do it for right now. I really appreciate everybody for watching. I hope you'll follow along on the next installment of this series. But other than that, we'll see you next time.